This one is going to be super, super exciting. Asia has been somebody that's been extremely fun to follow over the last, I guess, year, 2 years? Yeah, something like that. She's about to tell you everything. I don't know why I'm repeating it beforehand. But yeah, this is going to be super, super fun. But Asia's built something really incredible and is at the beginning of a new stage that I'm excited to see where it goes. So I just want to welcome you to the stage, Asia Beckett, and I'm excited to hear your talk.
Thanks, Ryan. Cool. Oh my God, it's so good to see you. So hi, my name is Asia Beckett, and I am the founder of Shotsy, which is the #1 companion app for people who are taking GLP-1 medications, like me. But these are like Ozempic, Zepbound, if you've heard of any of these. They're largely being used for weight loss right now, but they have a lot of other benefits. I launched Shotsy in May of last year, and I did it totally alone. I'm an iOS engineer, and I had a day job, so I was working nights and weekends. Maybe some of you know the grind of being an indie dev, and it was totally a side project. But a few months after I launched, I ended up winning one of the Ship-a-Ton awards last year at the first Raga. So this was the prize, the billboard. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it was really exciting, and it was really validating because I had spent a lot of time working on it alone, and I really appreciated having RevenueCat kind of give me a little pat on the back for that. So. What I want to talk about today is what's happened in the year since then. And I think especially if you have ever been in this situation where you are working on an app by yourself, launching an app by yourself, maybe struggling to do it on the side of a day job, and wondering if it could be bigger, wondering what it might look like to raise money. And so the answer to this question for me is, can it be bigger? Yes. Yeah, it can get a lot bigger. So Shotsy launched and basically immediately took off. This is a chart of our active subscriptions over the last year. We currently have about 70,000 paying customers. We have about 250,000 monthly active users. That means we've got $4 or $5 million in annual revenue. And this is not a solo project anymore. So I want to talk about what this last year has looked like and share what I've learned, what I wish I'd known, for anybody who might be on a similar journey. So I am a serial entrepreneur, is what they're called. I didn't know that this was a thing you could be when I was a kid, but when I was in my early to mid-30s, which was a while ago, I started realizing that being independent is something that was an option that I could have. I was working for a media company at the time. I was doing web development for actually a company here called TED. And I had a project that I really wanted to work on that I ended up spinning out into my first startup, and that was called Civil. We had a commenting platform for news companies. It was a really great product. I ran it for 2 years, and then ended up having to shut it down, and then got into mobile app development. So after Civil, I worked on a string of language apps. I thought I had an idea for doing language education, like speaking practice, lots of really clever ideas. But kind of went through one after another. I ended up doing an entrepreneur camp with Apple. They hosted like a special program for people to kind of learn how to get better at launching app companies, where I met a lot of really great people. But after this was 8 years of trial and error, and really 8 years of failure. So one of the main things I learned, especially doing the language apps, it's really hard to compete with Duolingo. If you went to their talk this morning, a lot of what I was doing was the stuff that they're doing now with like practice conversations, and it is a great idea, but I was trying to do it by myself. I was trying to do it without money, without resources, and I was trying to do it as a full-time job. I was burning through my savings. I didn't have a day job. That was getting increasingly stressful, especially as time went on. It got to the point where I was really stressed about paying rent and even buying groceries. Like, things got really tight. And I've got a daughter, so this was really starting to get to the point where, like, I think at one point I watched the 90s movie Titanic again, and there's this scene where the captain realizes that the ship is going down. Spoilers! The ship is going down, and it's just him on the bridge, and he's like, that moment of realization. And it kind of felt like that a lot, like this is not working, and I'm not sure how I'm going to change this. So what finally did change was, honestly, I got a day job, which is maybe kind of a weird inflection point for a talk about indie development and raising money, but this ended up being a really crucial step for me. It's really hard to be creative and to solve interesting problems when you're really worried about money, like really worried. And as soon as I started working I took a job at the New York Times as an iOS engineer, which is a pretty cool J job. And as soon as I started, honestly, I was able to relax and not think about apps for a couple of months, and really start to get my feet under me, and also to start taking care of my health, which is something that I had really been neglecting. I am a person who has always struggled. So this is going to get kind of personal, but I've always struggled with my weight. Ever since I was a teenager, I have fluctuated from really like the low end of overweight into obesity, and I've tried everything. I knew exactly how many calories were in everything I ever ate. I was going to the gym. I was doing all the keto and intermittent fasting and all the things that have sort of come along in the last 20 or 30 years. But nothing was sticking. It wasn't an education problem. It just, my body was fighting against me. I just couldn't maintain any significant weight loss over time. And I got to the point where I was at my highest weight ever 2 years ago, actually, today. And then I started taking a GLP-1 medication. The one I'm taking is called Zepbound, and I started it in January last year. And it has been absolutely game-changing for me. I've lost 95 pounds. It's been easy to keep it off. The main thing that it's done is take away this food noise, which, if you've never experienced that, then, bless your heart. But it's an obsession with food that is hard to explain, but it's there every moment of the day. From when I would wake up to when I would go to sleep, I was thinking about food to some degree or another. Even when I was eating, I was thinking about what I was going to be eating next. And I thought that was normal. I thought that's how everybody felt. And the people who weren't struggling with their weight, I thought that was because they had more willpower than I did. About 12 hours after I started my first shot, the food noise completely went away. And for the first time in my life, I could experience what it felt like to not have this addiction, basically. And it completely changed my life. So the problem is that my experience is not the experience that everybody has. Not everybody has such a positive outcome from taking a GLP-1. These things are very expensive. They can be very difficult to access. And they come with some side effects and some lifestyle changes that are necessary. And a lot of people don't have that kind of support from their doctors. You get the prescription, but then you're kind of on your own until your next appointment, which might be a while, especially if you're getting it from a telehealth provider. So there's a real need for day-to-day support. And especially if people are going to have the kind of life-changing experience that I've had, they need to understand How can you get the most out of these? How can you avoid the unpleasant parts? Because it's absolutely doable. The medications work, but the support just isn't really there. And so that's why I built Shotsy. So Shotsy was and still is the only real app that is focused specifically on this unique GLP-1 experience, right? This is a new way of controlling your health. It needs a new type of health tracker. So the things that Shotsy does that are really specific to this is obviously lets you keep track of your shots and the logistics around them, but it also helps you correlate side effects. It helps you correlate dosage strengths that change a lot. There's a surprising amount that patients have to self-manage, or there's a surprising amount that patients sort of drive in this experience. I think more than a lot of other weekly medications or regular medications, a lot of the decision-making is around how the patient is feeling. And so dosage changes aren't determined by blood work. It's determined by, are you feeling hungry? Are you feeling nauseous? Like that's a big part of the conversation. And so it's really important for patients to keep track of that, to be able to have good conversations with their doctor, to be able to manage their own expectations. So there's real problems that Shotsy is solving, and it's it's really meaningful for me to get to work on it. So building this first version, again, it was completely solo. I didn't have a team. It was just me and Xcode and Revenue Cat. Was there on day one. And a bunch of sticky notes, and I really was just building what I needed, the tool that I needed for myself. I was also part of the Reddit community for the medication that I was taking. Reddit ended up being a really big part of this. So I launched a request for beta testers on Reddit. This is the post. I put out a request asking for 25 beta testers. The slots filled up in 90 minutes, and I ran the beta test for about a month. Just emailing back and forth with everybody, learning so much from what they were interested in. Of course, my feature set wasn't exactly the same. There's a lot of different people taking these for different reasons, and it was really valuable to be able to go back and forth. One of the things we realized together was that this has a lot of overlap with period trackers, and that it makes a lot of sense to think about it in terms of this is essentially another way of controlling modifying your hormones, and so it makes a lot of sense to be able to look at it that way. And it's really exciting that those original 25 beta testers, I think most of them are still active in a much larger group of beta testers today, but we are deeply appreciative of everything that they've done with us. But about a month later into beta test, I put the app up on the App Store. Again on Reddit, but by then there were thousands of people that were waiting, that were excited to get to use it. So it launched and was immediately making money. I had the paywall on day one, and it really resonated with people. This is a group that has historically been underserved by a lot of different aspects of society. We are not used to being catered to and having our needs put, in the center. And so I think when this app launched, it really touched a nerve. Like, this is made for us. This was made by one of us, for us, as part of this really emotional experience that we're having, right? So it's charts. It's a lot of charts. We joke that it should be called Chartsy. But what those charts represent and the emotional connection that they have with people who are experiencing this journey can be really profound. So we get a lot of customer support emails from people who are just so grateful for this, who feel seen by this app. And I totally get it, because that's what it means to me as well. It's like having something that's really specifically designed for your experience when you've had a lifetime of being told that you're doing something wrong, or you're just not good enough, or even getting judgment from your doctors, from everybody telling you that you're the problem. When you get when you get to experience this condition finally being treated, and when you get to realize that it was never our fault, like it was never fair to blame people with obesity for the condition. It doesn't make any more sense than blaming somebody with asthma. Like, it's a condition that needs to be treated, and once it's treated, you can't even tell, right? Like, it absolutely changes your life. So, and I wanted to say one more, just from the launch. A little while after we launched, it took us a while to get on Android because, again, it was just me for a while. And before we launched on Android, we had one user who wrote in and said that they were so eager to use it that they went and bought an iPad just so they could use Shotsy. And it's not an iPad app, so yeah, we're on Android now. So fortunately, I hope if they're out there, I'm sorry it took so long, but yeah. This does kind of segue into why I decided to raise money. So I had a hit on my hands, and by this time last year, 5 months after launching, it was already making $50,000 a month, just from the consumer subscriptions, because so many people were willing to pay for it. 95% of the app is totally free, but there's 2 features behind the paywall, and a combination of wanting those features, but also wanting to support the app and support the people behind it. I think brings a lot of people to pay for it. So there was a point where I could have stayed indie. I could have just continued to grow organically. We had huge organic word of mouth growth, but I knew that this had the potential to be a really big opportunity. The relationship that we have with this GLP-1 experience, being the companion app, being the touch point, really one of the only tangible parts of this experience, right? Like, you take the shot, but then there's a week before anything else happens again. And when you have an app and the charts and the data and everything that you can interact with every day, it really helps make the experience feel a lot more real, which is important when you're wondering, like, is it working? Like, is this going to be another failure? Is this, because it takes a while, right? Like, it's important for people to have a touch point. And so the impact that this had on our users and the number of people who can benefit from this app made me think that this was going to be way bigger than just me. And I was still working my day job. I was having a really interesting time, working on the athletic app during the day, and then not coming home because I was working from home, but turning to the other computer and then working on Shotsy with every other waking moment did not feel sustainable. And since I don't come from family money, I didn't have any safety net. And again, I still needed to worry about paying rent. And I think because I had come so close to the wire before the day job, I knew that I didn't want to go back there. And I also had people that I wanted to hire, and they didn't have safety nets. And so it felt very risky to ask them to leave their jobs and to go full-time on something when I didn't have, when we were growing organically, that it takes a long time to actually get the money from Apple. It could take 6 weeks, and so it can be scary at first, especially when you're growing quickly. I had practical reasons to want to make sure that we had a safety net, but I also knew that I wanted to be able to move quickly and go after this huge opportunity, right? So when you think about raising money, I think probably we're all familiar, there's trade-offs. You're called an indie dev because you're independent and you control 100% of what you're doing. Nobody else is involved. There's no investor relations. There's nobody that you have to answer to. But then, of course, you have the constraints of growing organically, right? You've got to wait until the revenue grows before you can decide. And probably you want to give yourself a good cushion, and so you need to wait a long time before you start adding more people to the team. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get on Android. I wanted to be able to build the team that I thought could really go after this opportunity and make sure that we stayed the category leader in this fast-growing space. And I also had this in mind because I learned this the hard way. If there's no money, there's no mission, right? My first startup, Civil, had this amazing product, Civil Comments, and I poured my heart and soul into this platform. I was, again, a web developer at the time. This was a third-party JavaScript tool. It was a drop-in replacement for Discuss, if anybody's ever used Discuss. But it let you, type a comment on a website, on a news website. And I had a clever way of preventing harassment and abuse in news comments in a way that the newsrooms wouldn't have to moderate it, and it worked really well. We launched on a bunch of big news sites. We were on the Globe and Mail in Canada and the Denver Post and a bunch of big newspapers. And the newsrooms loved it. It was working really well, but it wasn't making enough money. The newsrooms couldn't afford to pay very much for a commenting platform, and I had a minimum headcount of 6 people, and I couldn't pay 6 people to keep it going. And so when the money ran out, I had to shut it down and call all of our customers and tell them that we weren't going to be able to continue offering it as a product. And it broke my heart. It was really it was miserable not being able to continue to work on this product that was working so well, but just didn't have the business model there. So I didn't want to make that mistake again. And a lot of this was going through my head when I was deciding whether or not we should raise money. So October, I think it would have been October 2024, decided, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. The revenue was just taking off, and it was, things were. We were at the point where things were starting to fall off the rocket ship, and I guess here, I'll take a step back. So one of the things that I got from this experience running Civil was I had pitched a lot of VCs. I had built a pitch deck. I had gotten introduced to a lot of VCs. I did the whole Sand Hill Road shuffle down in the Bay Area, and pitched a lot of big famous investors. Everybody said no, but it was good practice. And when I decided that I wanted to do this, I did have a frame of reference. So I wasn't starting from scratch on this skill set. I had an idea of how fundraising happens. There's also some books that I had read years ago that kind of explain the VC side of things, and I think I'd been following people online, and I had kind of a sense of what it means. So I wasn't starting from zero. But on a practical level, I went down to an event at Apple headquarters last year. Again, I used to be part of this entrepreneurship program that they had, and this is me with one of our reps and a couple of the then contractors at the time who were starting to freelance on Shotsy. And on the way back, when I was in the San Jose airport, I sat next to a guy in the terminal who I had worked with at Civil. Actually, it was one of my engineers from Civil, and he was coming back from a fundraising trip for his new startup. And I had just gotten the new Revenue Cap mobile app, which had just launched, and I showed him my charts, and he said, you know what, I would really love to introduce you to some investors. And I said, yeah, okay, let's do it, and within, it happened really fast after that, honestly. It was about 3 weeks later I got my first set of term sheets. So I actually had my choice of investors. So I got multiple offers from firms that I had pitched, and these are the investors that I chose to go with. So I knew that I wanted to work with Adverb in the Bay Area because I'm just super impressed with the team's focus on product specifically. I knew that it was going to be really important to me to be able to work with VCs who shared the same focus on delighting users and focusing on the product as I did. And that's very much, that's such a huge part of working with April and Jessica at Adverb. And then they introduced us to coalition operators here in New York and Springbank Collective here in New York. And again, just an incredible set of skills and expertise and talent. I think together this group unlocks a lot of expertise that I don't have personally. I'm very much an app developer, and obviously I know a lot about GLP-1s, but when it comes to what I wanted to do with growing a larger company, I needed help. And I was really looking for investors who could bring not just money, but also a lot of really good advice and connections to the table. So yeah, I've been super lucky to get to work with this great team. I forget if I'm going to talk about this in a bit, but one of the things that I'll come back to this. So let me explain just real quick the nuts and bolts. I don't know if anybody's dug this deep into fundraising, or maybe you've done it already, but the vehicle that you use at this stage. So our fundraising was called a pre-seed round, which used to be called a seed round. It's just, we just keep kind of moving the goalpost on that. But our pre-seed, which is kind of the first institutional funding, was done on it's called a safe note. So it means that you're not setting a price on the company, you're not setting a price on the shares, you're not actually selling shares right now in the company. It's sort of an IOU for a future event. When there's a price, when there's shares to be sold, they have a claim to it from this safe note agreement. But it's very simple. It's in the title, and it can be done with just negotiating a few simple to understand terms. And so we went back and forth on really, there's only one thing that you negotiate, and it's the valuation cap, which is it's sort of like a stand-in for a valuation. But we went back and forth over like a week and a half, got it done, and then I think the wire transfer for the first funding came in December, I think, of last year, and then we had it totally wrapped up within a couple more weeks after that. But that first wire came in, and I had never raised that much money before. Here, I guess. It was a good amount of money. So I ended up raising a little over $2 million. And when the first wire came in, thank you. So I was attending a Q&A session for local entrepreneurs. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I was doing a founder Q&A, and I checked my phone in the break, and it said that the wire had come in, which was very exciting. It was nice to be able to share it with the group. But yeah, it's funny because not a lot really changed substantially after that. I mean, we already had a business that was running. It definitely made it easier to start bringing on more contractors, bringing some contractors in full time, which was great. And I think really starting to build the team, building out customer support. If you've done indie development for a long time, and especially if customer support is very important to you, you know that is a huge part of the job, right? Especially when you're also fixing the bugs, and being able to hire a professional customer support team to focus on that and to make sure that people were getting good, fast responses around the clock was such a huge relief. That's such a big part of our company and our brand. We focus a lot on our customer support process, and people talk about it. I mean, it's in you see in our app reviews, people are calling out our customer support people by name and talking about what a great experience they have with them, which is unusual, I think, for a lot of apps. It can be, it can be difficult to keep up with everything. So, we've been able to hire for more product engineers, and I just brought on our new chief science officer. So he was a former FDA official who is helping us navigate this world of being adjacent to healthcare and making sure that we are continuing to put patient privacy and data security first and foremost, because that's also been a huge priority for me since the start. We don't even have user accounts, actually. Like, you don't have to enter your email to use Shotsy. It's completely anonymous. And the data is all stored within on iOS, it's all stored within your private iCloud account. So now, we're going to be able to really deepen our support and our scientific backing with, advisory boards and all sorts of great stuff. So the VC money has definitely unlocked a lot of opportunities for us to grow beyond, I think, what we'd be able to do with our organic revenue. So I wanted to talk a bit about what I think investors are looking for and what I think is important to consider if you're thinking about making this leap from being an indie developer, indie business owner, to taking outside funding. And I think the most important thing is that you have to understand where they're coming from. When you're raising money from VCs, it's different from angel investors. Angel investors are investing their own money, but VCs are investing somebody else's money. So it's their job to maximize their returns. Angel investors might invest for a lot of different reasons, but VCs all invest for the same reason, and that's to get huge returns. So they need to make big bets, and they need you to want to get big. So if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to keep your business small, focus on organic growth, keep it close held, taking in VC money might not be the right choice, because when you accept this level of funding, you are accepting that you are going to try to grow this as big as you can, as fast as you can. And if that's not what you want to do, it's going to result in a really painful relationship. Because, here we go, investor relationships. Yeah, so the check is really just the beginning. When you're working with VCs, that might be a 5 or 10 year relationship, and you're going to go through a lot of highs and lows together. So it's incredibly important that your values be aligned, that your interests be aligned, and you need to think about, do you want to do what the fast, big growth, and it means hiring ahead of revenue. It means having to focus on the business to a degree that you can't do if it's something that you're doing sort of as a lifestyle business. There's not really like as much time off. I think there's not a you're gonna focus on building for probably the next 5 years at least. So for me, it's been, I think, a big part of why this has worked so well is because we're in alignment, because the things that I want and the things that my group of VCs want are aligned. And so not only does that sort of avoid some of the pain of misalignment, but it also means that I look forward to our monthly calls. So because I raised on the safe note, there's no board, or I'm the board. There aren't any external board seats, but I agreed to information rights, which means I send them an email once a month with an update on how the business is doing. But I've also gone beyond that and asked them to join a monthly call, sort of an office hours, to talk about the latest update, the things that the challenges that I'm seeing, the opportunities that I'm seeing, because I found that they're very helpful to helping me see around corners. Like they know so much and so much more about the growth side of this than I do. And so I think a lot of that is because I've been able to choose the right investors for me and make sure that there's that alignment. I did want to just say, if you are new to raising, especially if you're planning on talking to angel investors, or there's two things to look out for. One is that, especially if you're outside of kind of the bigger fundraising markets, like the Bay Area and New York, you might talk to a lot of people who call themselves investors, but they don't actually write a lot of checks. I don't know if anybody's experienced that with fundraising, but it's one thing to sort of identify as an investor. It's another thing to actually take it seriously and be somebody who actively does invest in early stage, risky startups. So it's good I've learned to sort of look out for unserious investors who might be wasting your time with a slow no or a slow maybe where they keep moving the goalpost. A serious investor should be able to make a decision within a couple of meetings, especially at the very early stages. So if things keep dragging on and there's a lot of requests, that might be a sign that this is just not going to work and you shouldn't waste your time. And then another thing to watch out for, I think especially at the angel investor level, is nervous investors who want a lot of control. People should not be investing money that they can't afford to lose. And so if you start to feel like somebody is maybe a little bit too stressed about this, that's probably not a good sign. Like you really need to work with people who are going to be comfortable with the level of risk that they're taking. Some other things that I think a lot of what's gone so well is that when this opportunity came along, when I started building Shotsy, when I was able to sort of be the first in the store with this app, a lot of what worked well was that I had so much failure behind me, and I had already made so many mistakes. I think that's just so many. I mean, I think having 7 or 8 failed apps behind me meant that when this opportunity came along, I could actually take it much further than I think I would have otherwise. And it also meant that I could get to the point where the traction was so convincing that it was not a difficult thing to go out and raise money because it was just all moving so fast. The other thing that I think, another thing that I think worked really well here is I kept my day job. Again, financial stability is really crucial for good creative problem solving. When you're trying to do both, you're working the full-time job and then you're also trying to, get an app off the ground on the side. It can be very tempting to think, if I had 8 more hours a day, I'd be able to do X, Y, and Z, and then it would take off. I did that, and it was awful. It was instead of suddenly having 8 hours a day that I could use to grow the app. Instead, it just got more and more stressful, and I ended up making decisions that were based on fear and anxiety instead of being able to just stay rooted in the problems that I was solving. But then finally, the other thing I think that I needed to learn was that it's really important to work on problems that you're actually experiencing yourself. Because back when I was doing those language apps and trying to compete with Duolingo, I'm not actually a language learner. I only speak English, which is very sad. But I'm not a person who spends a lot of time dabbling in language learning. And that meant that whenever things would get hard, or whenever I would try to participate on Reddit, you could tell that I wasn't authentically part of that community, that I didn't really have my heart in the problems that I was solving, and so things would just sort of peter out. It's a huge difference now working on something where, first and foremost, I'm making it for me, and I'm going to keep using this app every day, regardless of what other people do. And so I want it to be great, and I want to keep working on it because it's really important to me beyond the business. And I think that's a huge part of what makes it possible to succeed in an increasingly competitive space. So I still think about, I'm on the indie stage, and I think about that tension between independence and raising money, taking investor money. And I think that I think that it is. I think it's. Well, I mean, I know that it's possible to do both because I think of the indie mindset now as being one that it can translate, right? So focusing on craftsmanship, focusing on obsession with the user experience, being an authentic part of your user base. You can keep all of that. I have kept all of that, and that continues to drive, I think, a big part of our success in the space is that we have that focus on the user. But I'm not alone anymore. So I'm independent in the sense of, I think of having that mindset, but now I have the huge advantage of having a really fantastic team to help me actually grow this thing. So how big can this get? I mean, that's the big question, because that's the journey that I'm on. We now have lots of copycats that have jumped in since I launched Shotsy last year. Plus, of course, there's much bigger companies that are very interested in the space, and we're now competing against pharma companies. So, in that kind of landscape, a $2 million fundraise is pretty small. But so far, it's been enough. We're able to continue to focus on the product. We're able to keep getting the word out there. We still have mostly organic growth, so that's really helpful. And I think the fact that this is the only app that's actually run by people who are taking GLP-1s, who understand the community that we're serving, who have that empathy for this really emotional experience that people like me are on right now, gives us a huge advantage. And I want a team like this to be the category leader in the space, because so often you see, kind of the passionate team with the authentic connection to the user base get run over by sort of the next wave of opportunistic finance bros that come in and just sort of take all the air out of the room. And it's really important to me that not be the case here. That this be a space where everybody involved in the GLP-1 experience understands how important this is and understands what this means to people, so that it's not just sort of a cash grab. And so I think the opportunity here is huge, and I think that making the choice to accept funding has set us up to be able to go after the leadership in what's going to be an enormous space. So maybe next year I'll be able to talk to everybody from the main stage. So thank you all. Thank you so much.
Man, that was like seriously awesome. We have a few minutes, so if you all have any questions, we can do a little Q&A.
Yeah.
So anybody that has questions, I will run after you and put this mic in your face so that our listeners online can hear the question. So, all right, I see a bunch of hands. So.
Thank you, Asia. That was great. My question is around that question of how big it can get. I think one of the things with VC that I've seen at other high growth startups is this pressure to hire immensely, right? And you're hiring hundreds, eventually thousands of people, and growing the company to race towards IPO. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that is the only path, or but because you came from the indie, are you trying to chart a little bit of a different path for your growth? And do you see maybe your growth looking a little bit different when you think about how big it can get?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is a big part of why I chose the VCs that I did, and why it's important that I came into that process with the leverage that I did. Right, so I already had traction, I already was making money, and it meant that I could set the course for what type of investor I wanted to work with, because they're not all coming from the same background, and so. Working with our lead investors at Adverb meant that we were making a choice to work with people who prioritize product and prioritize user experience, right? So they've been actively telling us don't just hire for no reason. Really focus on making the product as good as you can, really delighting the users, and then growing from there. Like the product will, like delighting the users will grow the business. And yeah, so I think it's really important to think about those relationships and making sure that you're working with people that are going to be aligned with the way that you want to grow the business.
All right, there we go.
Thank you. Asia, thank you for sharing the story. I love where it comes from, super authentic, and yeah, thanks again. One question I had is, at the beginning you posted on Reddit, right, for your initial beta testers, and then while the beta was going on, you seem to have collected a bunch of, other people that were interested. Yeah. I was just curious, tactically, how did that play out? Like, how did the thousands of people come onto your wait list, and what did your launch look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the excitement for Reddit was really, I was not expecting it, because it's Reddit, and it's really hard to impress anybody on Reddit. But what ended up happening is people started sharing the charts. So when you're entering your shots and your data into Shotsy, even in the early days, you could generate all of these charts, and people just started taking screenshots and posting them. So even during the beta test, people were sharing stuff, and everybody was asking, like, "Whoa, how'd you make that? Like, where'd you get that?" And I think especially because all of the beta slots had filled up, but the post was still there, and so people were coming in for weeks afterwards saying, like, "Oh, it's too late. Like, let me know when it launches." Like, that was just getting longer and longer. And then our beta testers were also telling people about it. So, and I think also our beta test got bigger than 25 during the course of the run. So I think maybe the link was getting shared with some people, which is great. I mean, it was exciting to see. It was exciting to see even when it was in test flight that it was starting to really resonate with people. And so so when I was getting ready to post the actual announcement when it was in the App Store, I think people were just ready. There was excitement around it finally being available because a lot of people were aware that there was this beta test that was happening that they didn't have access to. So yeah, I think, yeah.
Cool. Anybody else have questions? All right. People always raise them on like opposite ends.
I think your story is so amazing. Thank you for sharing. Found it so inspiring. When you raised the $2 million, you were already at around 600K ARR. What did you feel like was kind of the big unlock that the $2 million? How did it supercharge you getting from the 600K to now $4 to $5 million ARR?
Yeah, that's a great question too. It meant that I felt comfortable quitting my day job and going full time, and knowing that I wasn't going to be jumping back into the fire, right? I wasn't going to be jumping, different kind of fire, but I wasn't going back to that feeling that the wolf was at the door and that I was, not going to be able to pay my rent. I knew that I was going to be able to pay my rent. And then with starting to hire the team, I could immediately hire people and know, like, we have a cushion, we have a safety net. We're not, if things turn south a month from now, I'm not going to have to lay everybody off. And then, so that was the immediate impact, was that I was able to start bringing on people full time, including me, to really focus on it instead of it being a side project. And that did, once the resources were there, that did end up being a huge advantage. But then the other thing that happened was as well-funded competitors started to enter the space, we were ready for them. And so, the thing that I think often happens where kind of the scrappy, early, idealistic team gets just completely run over by the well-funded team with the marketing budget, that hasn't happened, because every time a team has come in and tried to do that, we've been able to really, focus on all of these strengths that we have and stay competitive. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any other questions? We still have a little bit of time. All right.
Thank you for sharing. How did you come up with Shotsy? I noticed you changed the name for the app. Do you feel like it helped? How important it is to have a nice short name?
Yeah, so the name Shotsy, which I think is a term of endearment in German, it was originally called Shot Tracker, but I wanted something that was a little easier to remember and something I knew from previous attempts with apps that it was important to have a memorable name and something that people could type in easily. Now, I probably could have chosen better because people spell Shotsy in all sorts of different ways, but that's okay. Those all resolve in the same app. I think now that you're seeing a lot of other apps in the space, it's a difficult app to name. I think there's a lot of interesting variations out there, but Shotsy has worked really well for us, and I think we're well prepared for even the next couple of developments that are going to happen in the space. The only thing that I didn't realize was that I didn't realize that shot was so specific to American English. They're not called shots outside of the U.S. They're called jabs in UK and Australian and Canadian English. And so, we've also joked that maybe it should be called Jabsy. But so far everybody's sort of been willing to overlook that. I think people being able to recommend it through word of mouth, I think that's a lot of what happens is somebody will say, somebody will talk about their GLP-1 experience, and then they'll, in the same breath, talk about how important it is to get Shotsy. And it's really good that we have something that's easy to find. The naming thing is really interesting. I didn't realize how important that was when I started.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Writing revenue kite is painful.
What's
3
that?
times in one email. Saying revenue kite is so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to steal a question too. On that note, is there can you not use GLP-1 in anything? Obviously it's not in your name, but also it looked like it wasn't in any of your screenshots.
Oh, actually, I do use GLP-1 everywhere. That's sort of the generic term, at least in the U.S. The community that I was on for Reddit was specific to the Zepbound medication that I'm taking, and so I was only talking about Zepbound there. But the broader category is called GLP-1, and actually I'm more likely to use that because it's not a brand name.
Okay, so you can use that in your, as part of your long name.
Oh yeah, I mean GLP-1 is the generic category name for the type of medication. Cool. Yeah, and even some of the specific ones, it's the name of the the chemical and not the the actual branded medication name. And then with the brand names, as long as it's a reasonable use of it, and we can mention that we are for these branded medications. So.
Cool. Any other questions? All right.
Okay, I have another. This is very specific to kind of the healthcare adjacent space.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you're considering pursuing the route of getting FSA, HSA certified, and because I haven't seen many apps that are just purely software pursue that route. Mm-hmm. I think there's a huge focus on healthcare hardware that gets approved. But I do think that it unlocks additional revenue and user acquisition, right? If folks are able to pay for it through insurance or their employee-sponsored accounts. So has that been something you considered?
That's another. I mean, these are just great questions. We're absolutely we're definitely considering it, and I think it's one of the things that our chief science officer is going to help us with as we build out our advisory board and bring in more people in the healthcare space to help us navigate all of these different spaces. I think that's going to be a big opportunity for us. So thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more. So anybody else? All right, right there.
So this might have, I think it's probably more relevant in the early stages of your company. And I think, you've already talked about bigger competitors coming to the space, and it's great that you were someone who this app was for, and that's really important. But I've also heard the advice, you shouldn't design for something where you're the user because you're going to get too narrow. So how did you make sure, especially early days, you weren't doing that?
Yeah. So I think that's where the beta testers and then our customer support focus comes in. Because if we were still only building for my preferences, we wouldn't know about jabs and decimal commas and stones and all of the things that we've learned from our users since then. We're working with measurement units all over the world. We have customers I think we have paying customers in almost every country at this point. And so we are learning a lot about health tracking and all these different requirements that people have, the different reasons that they're taking these medications. And so it's really important that we listen to our users and that we really have great channels for turning those requests into product development. So yeah, so it's not just me. I'm user number one, but our vocal user base is actively contributing to our product roadmap.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Asia. That was incredible.